Timo asks, what camera do you use for YouTube? And do you use a separate microphone for the sound?
So yes, I'll answer that second question first. Yes, I do use a second microphone for the sound now. I didn't at the beginning, but I do now. So I've got something called a Blue Yeti microphone, which I think is owned by Logitech now. That's what I use to record the sound of my lovely voice. And then obviously the in-game sound still comes from the computer. Cards on the table, all of my videos are made through emulation. I don't have the facility to record directly from my BBC Micro, much as I'd love to. So I do have to record through emulation on my PC. As far as camera equipment is concerned, again, in the early days, if you look at any of my videos with sort of real life footage from the sort of early days of the channel, it was just me using my phone. I have since got a small handheld gimbal camera, which is called a MIO, and that's what I use. If I go to a retro show, for example, you'll see me kind of wandering around like this. That's what I use, and it gives pretty good footage.
Hey, thank you for your answer. So we've got some other questions here. We've got Elliot is asking, do you plan on covering games for any other Acorn machines, for example, the Atom or the Archimedes? Uh, they, especially game review wise, seem to have not so much presence on YouTube.
Um, I think of the two machines there, I would actually be interested in trying to review Atom games. Again, I've not used an Atom before, other than just very briefly in a museum. But yeah, I wouldn't say no to making videos about Atom games because I agree they don't have much of a presence on YouTube. With the Archimedes, I don't want to sound like I've got a problem with the Archimedes because I absolutely don't. But what I don't want to ever be in any video I make is inauthentic. And my fear with trying to make content about the Archimedes is I just don't know very much about it, and I could play an Archimedes game on emulation, and I just don't feel like I'd be able to give it the coverage that someone who knows a lot more about the Archimedes and the
Hmm.
games on the Archimedes would be able to do. So for the time being, I'd probably say no. The
Yeah.
only thing I would say I might do is I did pick up a few new developed games for Risk OS at the London Risk OS show, and I'd consider reviewing those because I feel like, well, they're contemporary games that anybody could review, so why not me?
Thanks for that answer. Chris asks, how supportive were your school with programming? Specific IT lessons, for example, or do they just kind of bundle everything and mix everything up with mathematics, like my lessons, says Chris.
So I'll try not to make this too long of an answer because I'm conscious of time. Let me just say, in primary school, my school was pretty supportive because the Beeb was still pretty present, and to be honest, you couldn't do an awful lot with it if you didn't at least try and teach the kids a bit of basic. I was very fortunate because my dad could program in BBC Basic. He actually wrote his own educational titles, and it's a crying shame that he got rid of all of his discs because I can't show any of it to you now because he got rid of it all. But because he programmed in it, he taught me, and he was the IT teacher at my school. But as he will tell you, he was heavily constrained by the curriculum, which changed dramatically in the 90s in a big way when it stopped being called IT and started being called ICT. And at that point, the lessons shifted completely across to how to use Word, how to use Excel, how to use Access. And from that point onwards, programming really wasn't something that we did at school. I and a few of my friends, including Simon, used to tinker about with it ourselves, but we didn't get support from the school as far as programming was concerned.
Hmm. Okay, thanks for that answer. Dave says, is there any game or game concept from another platform, whether it be retro, arcade, or modern, that you'd like to see converted or
Mhm.
adopted for Acorn 8 bits?
There is, and if anyone's up for the challenge of doing it, I would love it. So one of my all-time favorite games is Civilization, the original Civ for the IBM PC from Sid Meier. I've put far too many hours into that game. I think it's fantastic. It runs on, I think, 640K of memory, if I'm right, which is quite a bit more than the Beav has got. But I don't know. I wouldn't put it past the bit shifters to be able to get it running on a master. I think that could be doable. I couldn't do it, but yeah, I would love to see that.
Great. Um, here's a question that I'm going to throw out to the audience because I think Colin's story about starting off with his Acorn experience at the age of 4 is incredible. I'd like to see if there's anybody else in the room that has got, and come on the microphone because we'd love to hear you, early memories. You might not be going all the way back to age 4, but um, what's your earliest memories of touching base with Acorn machines, the Acorn experience? Um, I'd like to sort of open it up as a general discussion now, starting with that first question. So,
Well,
can anybody beat 4 years old?
I don't think I can beat 4 years old. I honestly can't remember what year I started nursery school. It's so long ago. But we had the BBCs in junior school, so for primary school. There were a few classrooms had one for the class. They were quite extensively used in the lower years because it was a good way to get the kids to. Well, it's a very interactive medium, isn't it? It's unlike putting the kids in front of a TV; they can actually interact with it, and that attracted me. And then we had some books in the school library about basic programming, so we had a rainy playtime one day, and I'm there on the computer programming stuff, and a few weeks later it was the parents' evening, and my primary school teacher told my mum, "Get that kid a computer. You know, it'll absolutely make his education go a lot easier," and it did. Started out with a Spectrum and then a PC later on, but the BBCs and the ARCs were always the neat machines.
Yeah, the hook of education for your parents always worked, didn't it? It worked in the advertising as well.
Yeah.
Everybody wanting to play games.
It worked. I said I'd like an Archimedes, and we saw the price of one.
Yeah.
I think I was very lucky because my father was in computing proper, as it were. And I'm too old to have had single digits when the BBC Micro came out, but I can remember being 7 years old and playing a game on a mainframe. That was
Nice.
my first. It was the classic Moonlander.
Wow.
And because Dad worked for ICL, and that set me on my path. And I had my school work experience at Micropower for 2 weeks. So I was up there in Leeds in 1985. And that was a great 2 weeks, I tell you, for a 15-year-old to be at Micropower. We used to, it was a bit further up from Superior Software. The Superior Software was a bit further down the road. I used to have to walk back to the bus stop or to the train station in Leeds that way. We used to sort of slightly spit at Superior Software as we walked past. But it was all very jovial and good fun. So very lucky like that. But at school, when I think I was in the third year, we had one computer, and that was in the little room next to the headmaster's office. And you had to book a half hour at lunchtime to use it or something, and it was only available at lunchtimes for people. But somehow there was an old Burroughs carcass of a mini computer in one of the schoolrooms, and some of the sixth formers were pulling it apart or trying to make it work again. Bit like a monkey trying to perform brain surgery in a way. And about as successful. But what we did there was really good, because at the school we managed to persuade the headmaster to let us have more time on it. It was boarding school. We could then weekends and after school as well. We could use the computer, and it eventually became 2 or 3. And by the time the fourth form had finished, I got 3% in my French exam, mostly because I've been bunking off and doing computer stuff. And I said to the headmaster, well, you might as well let us take an O-level in computer studies. He went away and found out if that was even possible. And so we were the first year to do a computer studies O-level. Or it was an AO level, actually. At that time, it was called an AO level.
Yeah, I remember
That's
those.
slightly better.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was my sort of memories. But 7 years old I was, so not quite as young as
7. Okay, so we got 7. That's close.
Probably around the same sort of time for myself. I know a few people on this call. I've told this story to a few times, but my computing journey, if you want to call it that, started back in junior school with quite a sad tale in some ways, but the head teacher literally could sort of see into the future and could see that these computer things were going to be something of the future, and wanted to get the kids involved in them, and chucked a load of the school budget at a Commodore PET, which was an absolute revolution, and it turned out in the long run to be the only computer in the Education Authority area. It raised such a stink within the authority that the head teacher lost his job because he'd, quote, wasted so much money on a ridiculous and frivolous idea that this was, he literally lost his job. He was,
wow.
He kept his job until the end of that year, and then he was terminated at the end of the year. Now, the interesting thing was, during the back end of that year, the school had a visit, as these things often do. As we little kids, there's groups of adults come round and look at what their children are doing, and little Johnny has to sit there and show the nice gentleman what you're doing on the computer. And we had a group come round, and they were looking at what we were doing with these computers. And this tall, slightly balding bloke was stood talking and discussing what we were doing. And I can't remember the guy myself. I was little Johnny sat at the computer, along with one of my mates. And long story short, this chap that, like I say, was slightly balding, turned out to be some bloke called Sinclair. I don't know if you've ever heard of his name. And he was so impressed at what the school was doing by putting this computer in and using it for education purposes that he actually gave the school 2 ZX81s, the thermal printers, the 16K RAM packs, 2 TVs, cassette decks, the works. If it plugged into a ZX81, he gave it 2 of them to the school, with the promise that when his new machine came out, he would replace them for his new machine. Now, rolling the clock on, he did indeed stick to his word and sent up 2 Spectrum, I think there were 16s with the packs on the back and everything else. Micro drives, again, everything was fully with the machines. And the school ended up going on to 2 or 3 places, and there are a couple of documents still floating around that you can find where Thurcroft Junior School and Sinclair were quite closely intertwined in a number of these things. It was quite nice for a little village school to be recognised by this big Cambridge company, and sort of thinking back now, this was all around the time just before the BBC contract was being thrown around. So it all really ties up nicely, as that's why he was doing these visits to places that were using computers to try and get Sinclair into the pre-sales part of it almost.
And some free beta testers
yeah,
at the schools.
Absolutely.
You're going to put it through much harder experiences than putting it in a primary school.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Commodore PET stayed on its trolley in the corner of our classroom. It never moved. It was always in our classroom, which we're quite fortunate of. But the Sinclair machines went into a separate room, which had a big iron gated padlocked door on the front of it, and kids were only allowed in there with supervision and all this sort of thing, which was quite comical because I think the PET probably cost more.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
When I was, must have been about 13 years old, me and my friend in the back seat of the car, we saw Clive Sinclair jogging around Cambridge somewhere. So we caught him in real life. So that was a big moment for us. But I think that story is great. That tops a one-to-one experience with one of the big guns. Okay, I've got another question actually, because again I was impressed by Colin's super use of his caveman space, and I'd like to know if anybody else in the room has a really well organized cave space for their Acorn kit. And have they experienced similar challenges? You know, you just have a tiny, small room to fit everything in. How organized do you keep yourselves? How many machines are you able to squeeze into into your caveman space? I'd like to hear some of your reflections of that, if you dare. And or to go a step further, turn on your webcam and let us see it. I think that'd be an interesting.
I'll go first on this one.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So about 18 months ago, I had a modest collection, and I had a really nice setup. I had a matrix switch for every. My plan was to have everything plugged in and accessible, because if it's in a box on a shelf or in a cupboard or in a loft somewhere tucked away, it's never going to get used. So my plan was to build a big shelving unit and put as much stuff on it as I could, and then hook it all up via video matrix switches to a handful of monitors, and there we go. And I did it, and it was great, and I had a lot of fun because these matrix switches had serial inputs on them. I had a lot of fun programming of a little iPad with a simple interface to switch things on and off, and it was great. And then I bought a load more computers and completely ruined it. And so I pulled it all out and acquired some more cheap 90s era, 2000 era sort of, video conferencing and that kind of equipment, and never quite recovered. So basically nothing's plugged in right now, and hasn't been for a long time. And this is, again, the longer term ABug attendees may know this, but I've been intending to get everything plugged back in again for such a long time. It's just not happening. So yeah, I'm not showing anything beyond this little square of my room because it's an absolute tip. Whilst I try and just figure out the wiring, because again, I still want to get everything plugged in and connected up and usable at the flick of a switch, as many as I can. But the density of the wiring that you need to do that is nuts. If you've got a stack of 10 or 15 machines in a shelving unit, that's a lot of power cables and a lot of network cables and a lot of video cables, a lot of keyboard and mouse cables, and it gets it gets very unmanageable very, very quickly. So I'm currently at that stage where I'm routing cables, and it's so dull and soul destroying that I kind of paused on it a while ago and never resumed. So I suppose my not a resolution, and I think I mentioned to somebody else. I think I mentioned to Mark actually. My not a New Year's resolution is to stop buying crap off eBay and use what I've got. Make the most of what I've got, and that includes the probably several thousand meters of video cable that I've got, and actually plug things in and get using it. So there we go. And then I will show it off. I will absolutely show it off because I'll be really proud of it.
We look forward to the day.
Next year.
Anybody else willing to talk about their man caves? It's difficult sometimes to negotiate with the other half, isn't it? To have a shared space as well.
Yeah, as I said, I think I'm very lucky in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's very generous.
Yeah. So does she have a little bit of space in the room where she keeps some of her things?
Yeah, so there is a cabinet to the left
Yeah.
of me here, which has got things like, so she's got a sewing machine and crochet materials, and
Yeah.
actually the bookshelves do have some of her books on there as well. So it's not completely my room, but
90%.
fair to say it's mostly mine, including the piano behind me as well. Because of course I had to pick an instrument that is, nice and big.
Large.
I think I'm quite fortunate, and I've got the second biggest bedroom in the house is my man cave cum workroom.
Oh, that's good.
So I've got a B and a master set up permanently that I use all the time. 2 workbenches for repairing machines on it, alongside my 2 3D printers. So everything's all set up. The only downside, of course, is, like I say, it is also my day job workroom, which is really frustrating sometimes, that you're trying to work and have a conversation, and at the same time you really want to sort that floppy disk out at the side of you. But yeah, I'm definitely not showing that one on here because it's a mess.
Not photogenic.
No, definitely not.
I thought I had that one sussed out, that, I'm quite lucky. I've got a fair amount of space at the disposal. But, what I decided to do is keep, the home office as home office, as office things. And I would just have one BBC Micro here in the office space with me, which was fine. And everything else, there's a room, cellar room, that's got about 26 computers in it at the moment. They're not all out, but like Chris says, it's good to have as many as you can out. So there are about 14 operational at any one time. And then obviously I decided to network everything all together and have it connect between the different floors. And now it doesn't matter which room I'm in, I can still get distracted by connecting remotely over the network.
What's your electric bill like?
Yeah. They've got a very good system. They've moved into a new apartment here. The roof tiles are also solar energy.
Oh, okay.
That's
good.
Modern building.
Yeah.
And I use computers to keep the room warm as well, but they're not on permanently, you see, are they? And as I was saying earlier, I can turn them on and off now with remote Wi-Fi sockets controlled. So Internet of Things, lovely thing. And also I've got some permanently set up in the UK as well in another cave I've got there. So
multiple caves, very lucky man.
Yeah, sort of 3 caves really. Still keeping them all tight. It's still a lot of wiring, and it's a lot to maintain. Keeping it all up and running. I mean, I work in IT and global IT for some large companies, and we've got a whole teams to do all that support. But here I am. I'm looking after 10 routers, firewalls, etc. Just to communicate between the different locations, VPNs to access it remotely, all of that stuff. It all needs maintaining. But fortunately, I've got the experience from how we do things in the commercial world to be able to do that in a fairly efficient manner. Although tools to do so are not always very cost effective, but there are ways to do that, aren't there?
So Chris says in the chat, a huge fan of the app controlled main sockets, no reaching behind or under things, reduces wear on the original machine switches. Yeah, very useful.
Yeah, I found that good for remote stuff, especially, just resetting stuff. So I'm trying to get to a stage where I don't have to be physically at the machines all the time, which again then is a space saver because you can actually sort of cluster them in shelving because you don't actually have to physically access its keyboard necessarily, but you can run as if you were. So I try to keep it authentic, and I'm still running that hardware, but it just might be a screen that's remote.
So Elliot says, my collection has the potential to be tidy, but never is. My cave is quite small and also functions as a bedroom, but currently has around 7 or 8 computers. Space ran out a long time ago, but still managing to fit things in. Well done, Elliot. Phil says, I don't know if my cave could be tidy. It's about 8 feet by 8 feet. That sounds smaller than Colin's. I have far too much stuff to put in it. It's spilled into the back bedroom. Oh dear. My long-term plan is to turn that back into a bedroom and perhaps move the computer workspace overflow into the loft. Yeah, the loft isn't such a great space for man cave, is it? It's a little bit cold, quite uncomfortable.
Not the loft, but if it's a loft conversion, then
if it's a loft conversion, not so bad.
I mean, it's got the insulation.
It is indeed a loft conversion. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah.
The way I've got things at the minute is I used to have a housemate in the back bedroom. So they had the best bedroom, and I've got a single bed up in the loft. So when they moved out last year or the year before, it was just an empty room that echoed quite badly, so I filled it with computers. So while I've been doing a lot of work, I've used that back bedroom.
I mean, Chris earlier, I was going to say this year, Chris last year, and myself, we both went through this phase, as it were, of trying to get stuff organized and just getting a whole load of IKEA boxes and getting some shelves goes a long way very quickly to getting things.
Oh, right.
I think actually we should maybe do a thing on this at a future meeting. How to try it. How have some of us been successful in organizing our computer retro kit?
Yeah.
And just share and swap the ideas a little bit.
I swear I'm not
over obsessive with neatness and tidiness. I am not going to name any names, and one or two of us are at the opposite end of said spectrum.
The problem there is that you do what I did, and I bought lots of nice IKEA tall storage cabinets, filled them, and now I'm filling the floor again.
Yes. So there you've got to do the trick that I did to my wife and said, yeah, I'll get you some new wardrobes from IKEA, but you're not getting any more. So every time you buy something, you've got to throw something away.
You can't throw anything Acorn away.
Well,
You've got to collect more.
I know, it's hard. Hang on, what are you telling? You flog them off on eBay. What are you talking about?
Not that much.
You need some dummy Sinclairs.
Yeah.
I think that could be a good discussion round at one of the future meetings. I'm going to have a top secret Excel spreadsheet. Colin, could you just mail me yours? I want to use it as a template.
Finally, I was going to ask anyone in the room because his spreadsheet is big enough as it is, Colin's secret spreadsheet, but do you have any other ideas for Colin or what you'd like to see on his channel in the future? So might have been a video that you've seen that you think, oh, a bit more detail or depth on that would be good. So yeah, pop your suggestions in the chat. And Colin might add them to his long list.
I'm committed to adding them to the list.
I must admit, he's caught one or two of my favourites that were a little bit under the radar, sort of Imogen. I mean, that was a classic favourite of mine. Labyrinth as well, and didn't have the big sort of following like Repton did, etc. But I still thought they were smashing games. I don't think there were many that he's missed really. GB Limited. Did you do GB Limited?
No, when I did the Advent series and I came across it threw up one of the, like business simulators. I've actually played quite a few of them, including GB Limited. What I've yet to find a way of doing is making them interesting as a video because it's text on a screen ultimately, and same with text adventures. It can be a little bit challenging to bring them to life a bit. But as games, they're great. I mean, I enjoy them.
I enjoyed Kingdom from the welcome tape tremendously.
Oh yeah,
especially when it managed to load from the bad tape machine we had. But that was part of the, it's loaded. Okay, that's the game. Which one had the most smiles per gallon on that? Yeah, I know what you mean. Making a text adventure interesting, that is challenging.
Yeah. I'm helped a lot if the text adventure has a few graphics thrown in. I don't know if any of you have played The Darkness of Ravenwood, one of the newer games. The graphics in that are outstanding. I mean, it's incredible. Like every room that you go to has a lovely graphic depicting where you are. So something like that is perfect. But yeah, as you saw with things like Colossal Cave Adventure, is just text, and there's not much that you can do other than just narrate it. And I suppose if I played it long enough and made my own map, it might be something you could use as a visual. But yeah.
You did mention one of my other favorites, and that I still play as well, which Civilization 1. But unfortunately, it's not on the BBC Micro. It was on some other contemporaries of the Archimedes, etc., like Atari and Amiga. But yeah, I still enjoy playing that Civilization 1. It's one of the few games I do play.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. But Peter Scott managed to get SimCity on the Beeb, so
I think we've got to put that one out there.
He lives down the road from me, actually, Peter Scott. I only realised recently, but yeah, he's actually a local.
Oh, does Tracy live down the road as well? So,
say again, sorry?
Oh, it wasn't Peter. Was it Peter Scott? Who was it? Who put the note to his girlfriend in all the games?
Oh, Gary Partis.
Gary Partis. It was Gary, wasn't it? Not Peter. Yeah.
That's right. Sometimes more than just a note, actually. But yeah, Zero of Destiny.
Just to say,
all the hackers found those notes. All the people trying to protect the software, like Phil.
Just to say, Colin, thank you so much for the interview today. I'm going to have to jump in the next 5 minutes. And thank you to the audience as well for asking questions and reacting to the interview. It's been a great experience.
Thank you.
And it'd be nice to do this again later this year. Some more interviews. And yeah, let us know. Let Chris know. Let Mark know. Who would you like to see to be interviewed? And which personalities in the Acorn world would you like to come along and we have a chat with. I'd love to get your...
What topics would you like to investigate more?
Yeah.
Not necessarily the people, but topics as well is a great thing. That would be
I like the idea of talking about man cave and organization, that type of thing. Yeah.
Some bit, I mean, Ed there, he looks very well organized with this bookshelf there. I mean, Colin's jealous about that bookshelf. You're on mute.
Maybe I should try and unmute myself successfully this time. It always happens. So this is the tidy part of the room, right? Let me show you the horror that is the two machines. But yeah, that's where all the second processor and stuff live. And I even have an Archimedes sitting here, but it's slightly more messy. And I've got these nice boxes, these roller containers in there. But of course, you need to put stuff in there instead of just putting them on the floor. So yeah, the attempt was made.
No, but I think, like Chris says, it's great to have them out and to be able to have them out permanently. And Colin has got one permanently on his desk there as well. I've got a few. We'll do that. We'll do a man cave exploration video, I think, and tips and tricks that we've all found of ways of keeping. I know Hoglet has got a fantastic shelving unit of BBCs just slotted one above the other, so he can take whichever type he wants out, etc., to do his testing on and things. So that would be a good thing to discover. So any other topics, let us know, myself, Paul, or Chris. And Paul, we've got to say thank you to Paul as well for all the work he's done in organising this, setting this up with Colin. That there's an awful lot of work that goes on in the background, and we will be doing this again in the future. So to Colin and to Paul, thank you very, very much to both of you for getting this all up and running and to get it sorted out and to do the advertising and to let people know as well. Thank you. It's a great start to 2025.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to see new faces as well.